Well, hello everybody. Here we are.
At last.
This week again. Oh no. It's been a
Yes,
couple of days.
yes. A couple of days.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, Monday. Completely forgot. Blondes.
Everybody watched, but Monday, yeah.
Blondes. Yeah,
Almost
that's
a week.
me. For me, it's a week.
It feels like a week.
Yeah, it does. Because we are so busy.
Yes.
That's why.
Yeah, definitely. Tomorrow.
And I be keeping pushing work towards you. I feel a bit guilty. Maybe.
Nah,
Not.
you don't have to. You don't have to be. Even if you were, you don't have to be.
No. Let's go to our guests. We have quite an interesting guest. Psychic medium, columnist, paranormal investigator. He's giving lectures, does events, and I think you know his name.
I think I know his name. Barrie John. Welcome.
Good evening. Thank you very much. What a wonderful, wonderful introduction. Thank you, Mary.
Yeah,
Thank you, Shane. Both of you for inviting me along. I don't know what we're going to talk about. Be ready.
Well, we have lots to talk about.
Good.
Yeah.
It's just great. It's great to be able to come and talk to you. I know we've been planning this for a while, Mary, and it's nice in a way, you know, and I get quite excited because I think, what are they going to ask me? What sort of things do people want to know? And I'm one of these, you know, I always pull something out of the hat and always tell you a few stories, something that's happened to me over the years.
Oh, I love it. We had Simon Entwistle, and we ended up hearing all about his ghost tours and his ghost stories. And we were so flabbergasted by the way he's telling his stories. We completely forgot what we were supposed to ask him.
So and that's the problem, you know. I mean, Simon is a wonderful fella. He's got some fantastic stories, and you know, I look back at my time, and I mean, I've been in this industry now for what? Well, I lose track. Over 35 years now, nearly 40 years, and I forget that because it seems like yesterday. And when people invite me along to do talks, I very often think, what am I going to talk about? And I forget the background that I've had, you know, and the things that I've done over the time as well, which is phenomenal. It really is. And one of the questions a lot of new people always ask is, you know, how do we get a name out there? You know, how do we get noticed? And I think they look at people like me and think literally it happens overnight. It doesn't. It takes a long time of pushing and pushing and pushing, you know, to get people to recognize you and understand who you are and what you do as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, we know the drill.
Yeah. It's not an easy road, you know, and as we all know, you know, you get into lots of battles, lots of, I don't like using the word fights with people, but you know what I mean by that. You know, there's always somebody who is ready to either put you down or pull you down or thinks that they're better in a way, you know. And I suppose it's one of the things I've always stood my ground on. You know, at the end of the day, I'm who I am. You know, I'm no better than anybody else. And here's Jackie. I'm no better than anybody else. And even with all my students, one of the things I always say to them, I want you to be better than me. That's the thing.
Yeah,
but people nowadays don't want anybody else to have the success they want.
I think you're absolutely right, Shane. And I think one of the problems is nowadays you can go online, you know, and you can do a course, you can be a medium overnight, you can be a paranormal investigator overnight. And to me, it's a little bit like people with degrees, you know. It's not just having it, it's knowing what to do with it and how to understand it. And this is the thing where I get very frustrated with people because, especially during the bad period that we all had of COVID, you know, where we were all closed down and we couldn't leave the home. And people were doing online readings, they were attending online courses, and suddenly, you know, overnight, we ended up, well, you went on Facebook and everybody was suddenly a medium giving card readings and giving, you know, psychic mediumship readings. And I found that quite sad in a way, because there was a lot of people going through sort of mental health situations during that time that were turning to these people for an element of guidance or support, and I don't think they were getting the best value, if you know what I mean. They weren't getting the credit what they deserved. That's the thing.
No.
And we still see that to this day.
Yeah.
It does.
Pops something in my head. Sometimes also on TikTok, on YouTube, you see those psychic mediums giving readings. They stir up the pot, and those people get in distress.
Yeah.
And then they're not at home, because then you have to go to someone else. And I believe if you are doing this kind of stuff, that you have to give them some guidance afterwards and know a bit of mental health issues.
Do you know, you're absolutely right. And I mean, I could look at that on a couple of avenues. Number one, when I give a reading to somebody, I take that as, number one, as a big respect thing for the person. You know, somebody's really trusting me to give them that element of guidance to help them through a situation. And what I always say is, you know, people come to me for two reasons, really. They either come because they've lost somebody and they're grieving, or they want to know about the future. Okay. And you find the different characters there. But I think you've got to be able to leave somebody at the end of a reading feeling on a high, not on a low. And I wouldn't want anybody to go away from me thinking, well, that's really upset me. That's really, really depressed me in a way. You know, I want to leave them on that high. And we find this exactly the same with sort of paranormal investigations, where groups go into people's homes. They don't ask the specific questions. Mary, you've just mentioned about mental health situations with people. And that's, people always look at that and think, well, why are you asking me about my mental health? Well, actually, it plays a part in terms of paranormal activity, because, you know, I don't know the person whose house I'm going to. I have no idea what they're going through in their life. You know, are they going through a divorce? Are they grieving? Have they just lost a partner? Have they lost a child? All these sort of things play a huge part. And I think, you know, you've got to be able to offer more, if that makes sense, not just give them a reading and go, thanks very much, I'm out the door now, you know, you go on your merry way. Because, you know, people have been to me for very difficult reasons. Maybe they've lost a partner through suicide, etc. And that person isn't just going through a grieving process. What they're going to go through is a counselling process as well. And I have to be able, as a medium, to go, wait a minute, I'm moving out of mediumship here into a counselling mode. That means I've got to change direction. I can't give a message from a loved one when somebody needs an element of counselling, because it's totally different. And I think the responsibility that is put on people like all of us is just catastrophic. It really is, you know, because certain medications we know affect people, certain things make it difficult for people through the lives, situations, for instance. And it's knowing when to say, actually, either I can help you or I can't help you. And if I can't help somebody, then I want to be able to, I would call it signpost them to a service that can help them somewhere down the line.
Yeah. That's the best way to handle it. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
you know, I get quite upset when people contact me and they say, oh, I've had a paranormal group in the house. And I go, okay, well, what's been the problem? And they'll tell me the story that they think something's there, you know, they think the house is haunted, basically. And I'll say, well, what did the group do? What did the group do? And they'll say, oh, well, yeah, they told us it was haunted, and then they left.
Oh,
and I think, you know, you've probably got children in that house, you know, with you. You know, I if that was me and somebody had come in my home and said, oh, yeah, actually, your house is haunted and I've got children in there as well, I'd be thinking, well, what do I do now? I can't live here anymore. You know, I need to move. And this is where people fail to complete the process, is what I'll word it as.
Yeah, and that
It's
happens
hard.
way too many times.
It does.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does. It does, Shane. And I think we see this evolving so much over time, especially with TV shows and television shows, and pardon our word, this American shows as well, where they look at things very different to how we do here in the UK. You know, I'm very much whatever you wish to call me, whether you call me a love and light medium, whether you call me a good news medium, you know, I have no problem. But, you know, I don't go into buildings suddenly summoning up things or looking on the dark side of things. You know, I try and look at it very positively. And I think that's the way that you want people to react, in a strange way.
Yeah.
I'm seeing a lot of names here that I recognise.
I'm just going to pop up all the names and the comments.
Yes.
I'm going to be in between. If you want to answer a couple of them, just let me know. I'll put it back on and answer the question.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting what Jackie said there. They probably caused more activity, and I think that's a really good one, actually, when, you know, groups, mediums are going into people's property, and let's call it that they probably stirring things up a little bit without knowing it, and leaving people in their own home to deal with that situation, which I find very hard, very difficult for people. I really do.
Yeah, we got another comment.
Barrie's
so sweet.
I know. But, you know, I mean, it's the one question people always ask me is, you know, where did it all start? Well, I'm 52 next week. You know, I'm not a young man anymore, and I still think of myself as being 21, like you, Shane. You know, I can tell you're a good-looking young man. But you know, over this time, I'm very cheeky, by the way. You'll get used to it. But, you know, over the time, I remember, you know, going back to being a child, and I'm talking probably about 4 or 5 years of age, where I used to see people waving at me through windows and sort of figures falling from the sky, you know, people falling from the sky. And I never thought anything of it. I really didn't. You know, I just used to lay there and think, oh, that's quite nice. You know, that's something interesting. And it wasn't until I started to get... how would I say this? My own sort of feelings, you know, things happening, and especially when people started touching me and putting hands on my shoulders, you know, and I used to feel that a lot, where spirit would come up behind me and just put the hand over my shoulder, you know. And I mean, I'll let you know a secret now. You know, I'm scared of the dark, and I'm a paranormal investigator. It doesn't work well, does it? It really doesn't.
No, it does not.
But, you know, it
does not work.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. You know, and I mean, people that know me, and everybody will laugh at this, I always say I have 2 rules in ghost hunting. One is, if a door's closed, it's closed for a reason, and if it is closed, I normally push another member of public through before me. But, yeah, honestly, Jackie will be laughing at this because she knows what I'm like, you know. But you know, that the thing is, for me, growing up, I was never told I couldn't believe it, if that makes sense. I was always sort of encouraged with it, because it came through like our family line, where my mum's side used to practice physical mediumship. You know, they used to do things like table levitation, for instance, all these wonderful stories during the wartime, especially the Second World War. And really, it fascinated me, you know, because I used to think, well, there's obviously something more to life than death. You know, there's more here. And I think it probably, as a child, made me very inquisitive about things as well. And I used to read some very sort of spiritual books, even as a young child. And I remember, you know, having sort of like my first set of tarot cards when I was probably about 10 years of age, and just playing around with them, you know, and it became, I'll call it became a little bit of a family party trick, you know, where my mum would say, oh, do your auntie a reading, do so-and-so a reading. And I never thought anything of it. And then they used to go, how do you know that? And I used to go, no idea, I don't know. And it really used to intrigue me. You know, I used to think, well, where's this coming from? You know, where's this information coming from? And it's just... I just find it phenomenal, even to this day. You know, when I do a show for people, if I do a demonstration or a public event, people always ask me, and I go, I don't know how it works. And I still don't know how it works in a strange way, because all I know is that I can stand in front of an audience or a group of people, and lo and behold, something comes through. You know, there's a connection there with the above, whatever you wish to call that, spirit world for me. And suddenly I start getting all these feelings, these names, these visions, bizarrely, very bizarrely. But I enjoy it. I really do. And, you know, the thing is, I think when you go through life, you hit a point where you suddenly awaken up. Something inside you awakens, you know, and you start looking at life very differently and thinking, actually, you know what, there is more to life than just going to work, you know, than just getting on with my life. And I think what it's helped me with so much, not only in terms of my professional career, but also in terms of my spiritual career, it's made me go with my gut feeling a lot more. And if something doesn't feel right, I'll go, actually, something's not working for me here. You know, something's not right. That means I've got to take a step back from it and look at it in a different way. But, you know, I mean, like a lot of people, you seem to fall into it when something's happened to you in your life, whether it's been what I refer to as trauma, something traumatic, tragic, you've lost a loved one, you've lost somebody close, maybe even an animal, you know, because remember, it's not always people that we communicate with in the spirit world. It could be somebody's pet that wants to come through and go, actually, you know, I've got your dog here, you know, I've got your cat here, I don't know, I've got your pet gerbil here or something, you know. And people forget that as well, that it's not only loved ones in the spirit world. They very often do bring through family sort of pets, you know, just to say that they're here with us now. And, you know, bizarrely, when I've done demonstrations, sometimes I'll get a pet's name come through and I'm thinking, what is this all about, you know? But that's how it works, isn't it? You know, it's that unknown factor, you know, and let's be honest, everybody's scared of the unknown at times, you know.
Yes.
Yeah, sometimes, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, Tracy's a very good friend of mine. In fact, you need to get Tracy on your show as well, because she'd be a wonderful medium psychic for you to have on the show. So we've done a lot of tracing back family history, especially on my mum's side of the family. And we can get back to James IV of Scotland on my mum's side. So quite interestingly enough, a king of Scotland there, a long way back. Yeah, I mean, it would have basically been something like my 14 times great-grandfather, which is a long way back.
But that is a cool discovery.
Yeah, do you know what? I'll be very honest. When I was at school, history never interested me at all. I had no time for it. I was very arty, very creative. I used to go down very much sort of like art, drawing, technical graphics, as it was called then. And I enjoyed it so much. But it wasn't until I started to get heavily into the paranormal and I started wanting to go into buildings and get provable information. You know, I always used to get people to write things down and go, right, what we're getting this name, we're getting this date, we're getting this circumstance. And it wasn't until then that I started to get a little bit of a hunger for history. And I think what was so nice was then I started looking into history in more detail, not necessarily of buildings, but certainly going back to what, you know, like the Tudor times in England as well, and following things through. And the funny thing was, I semi-retired from my own company in 2018. I still kept all the spiritual work going. But then I ended up being a historical tour guide. And I'm thinking, I never liked history. Why am I doing this job? This isn't me. But
it does not add up.
Oh, honestly, do you know, I have such a passion for history now. You know, I love it. I love looking back, and it's not only the history itself. It's sort of like all the complexity of it as well that comes in. You know, and I love things like I went to Hampton Court Palace once. A couple of years ago with my partner, And I remember going down that screaming corridor where Catherine Howard was meant to have run, you know, and chasing Henry into the chapel. And I think, gosh, I'd love to hear that, you know, I'd love to be there at night and hear a name called out or something. But you know, I mean, over the years, I mean, I work at a couple of historical buildings now locally. One of them being Newstead Abbey, which is the home of Lord Byron, the very famous poet. And also another one not far away. It's a private family home, but that's Welbeck Abbey. And the things that I've had happen to me when I've been unlocking buildings and locking them up at the end of the day, I've been locked in rooms. I've had my name called down corridors. I've locked doors, and I know that somebody was trying to open that door from the opposite side, because you can hear the handle going, and you're thinking, there's something very strange here, you know, this is very bizarre, even though I believe in it. And I'm again, you're going to laugh at this. I'm a proper sort of scaredy cat in a way, because I'm almost going, if you're there, yeah, that's all right. If you're there, just leave me alone. Let me do my job. You know, let me just get out of the building. And I remember years ago, I mean, I'm going back now, 25 years ago. I used to run the events for the Galleries of Justice at Nottingham, which is now the National Justice Museum. And I remember they used to make me lock the building up. Now, bearing in mind, it's so many floors, I can't remember, it's about 4 or 5 floors. And they always used to laugh because I used to make them wait in the courtroom upstairs while I went down. And literally, I used to scream or shout or sing right from the bottom as I was locking the building up, so I couldn't hear anything following me. Honestly, everybody used to laugh at me. They really did. Really
Oh, I'm glad I'm not the only lunatic.
honestly, do you know? There must be so many stories. What I could, you know, they suddenly just ping into my head, and I think, why did I do that? Why did I do that? You know, I remember many years ago, Richard Felix, who you probably know, me and Richard Felix did a charity ghost hunt. And there was me and Richard Felix locked in a condemned cell in the Galleries of Justice in quite late on in the night. And this is when Richard decided to tell me that he was so afraid he just wanted to get out. And I'm thinking, oh no, now that's going to set me off now, because he's scared. Now I'm going to be scared. And I always, it just makes me laugh so much. It really does. And some of the things over the years, I remember doing a ghost hunt at Tutbury Castle once with Leslie Smith. And me and Leslie were working together, and I remember we were in, I think it was the King's bedroom, if I remember, at Tutbury. And Leslie kept saying, there's something there, you know. And so I said, well, go to it, you know. And she was walking over, and pardon how I say this lady had got a luminous top on with luminous writing, and basically Leslie just grabbed her. You know, and it was just, honestly, it was silly things like that. And you think, oh no, what are we doing here? You know, but stories for me make the paranormal come alive. They really do. You know, they make it phenomenal. And I think everybody has a story to tell of a ghost hunt somewhere where we've done something. I've done it where I've fell over. I've done it where I've fell through doorways. I've done it where I've leaned on a door and suddenly it's not been locked and I fell through it. And, you know, I remember, I can't tell you the venue, but I remember doing a venue, a very old venue. It was a very much a sort of stately home. And I sat on a table and the table top come off. It literally flipped over. Oh, yeah. I'm not telling you what venue. I'm really not.
Yeah, I've had one night when I tried to lean against the branch. The branch was not there because it was another tree. I forgot the tree was not there anymore, so I was like, "Oh, there we go."
Do you know, I do have to laugh at times when I look back years ago, a long time ago, when I first started out ghost hunting. And I was telling somebody about when we used to do events at the Skirrid Inn, which is in Wales. It's a lovely venue, it really is. And I remember we used to start at something like 6, 7 o'clock in the evening. You go and have a meal, so probably something like fish and chips or something. Then we used to do the ghost hunt. And at 7 o'clock in the morning, then you'd have breakfast and you'd all go home. And I used to think, how did we manage to do all those hours? You know, even now, it gets to 12 o'clock for me and I'm ready for bed. I want to be home.
Yeah.
You
It's
know,
called getting older.
Oh, yeah. Well, you'll catch me up one day, Shane. but
Nah.
isn't it wonderful that we can share some great stories? And we can, I mean, over the years, I've had the pleasure in working with some tremendous characters from the metaphysical world, let's call it that, whether it be paranormal or mediumship world. And I take real pride and privilege in being invited to work with people like that, and I've never, ever, I don't want to call myself valued. I've never valued myself on that same level, and I've always just gone out there and done what I've done because I enjoy it, but I want people to enjoy it. I want people to have an experience with me and to be able to go away and think, actually, you know what, I want to do that again. I want to do another ghost event because there's something there, whatever that is. And I think at times this is where we get very lost with the paranormal, because I remember when I first started out a long time ago, almost 30 odd years ago, where we didn't have any tools, we didn't have any of the technology what people have got nowadays. And a lot of the time, the basic things we had was coins, like money, or we'd have marbles. That was it, or a cuddly toy. That was basically it, We'd have an old sort of tape recorder. You can imagine the really old-fashioned tape recorders that we might set up and record. But we never had things like EMF meters, K2 REM pods. It just didn't exist. And I do at times look back to the good old days, because people forget, when we used to sit in buildings or rooms, we just sat there, and we would sit there for 2 hours, 3 hours at a time, and you wouldn't necessarily be calling out. You'd just be sat there. You might talk to the person next to you for a couple of minutes, then you go, right, let's just listen now. Let's just see what's there. And I think over the years, we seem to have got so enveloped in equipment. It's all about the equipment nowadays. It's about getting the lights to go off, getting recordings and all that. And I think at times we forget the basics of why we started out. It was about proving something, whatever that was. If I look back 30 years ago, if we'd have got a knock on the door, we'd have been over the moon. We'd have been absolutely delighted. Whereas now, when you go to a paranormal investigation, you find that if a K2 meter goes off, or an EMF meter or a REM pod, people very often just go, oh, we've seen that before. And it seems to lose that quality for me. That was things that if we got that 20, 30 years ago, we'd be over the moon. We'd be going, we've had a brilliant night, we've had proof, we've had something. But now it's bizarre. I mean, I did an event, I can't remember what it was, a few weeks ago. I'm trying to think where it was, probably Newstead. And we were in a room with a group. And basically, I just said to them, what would it take you to believe? Oh, well, we want to see a full apparition in front of us. And I'm thinking, I've done this for so long. I'm still waiting for that myself. Never mind you guys, okay? And I think people forget that when we're doing investigations, it's not going into a room and suddenly everything happens. It doesn't happen in 5-10 minutes. There might be nothing happened for an hour, and then suddenly you might just get a few knocks or taps. But, that's what paranormal is to me. It's not an on-demand thing. It's a thing that you've got to almost let it build up, let it happen. When it happens, then I want it to be repetitive, or I want to get a consistency to it. So it's a little bit like photos. I always say to people, don't just take one photo, take 5 or 6 in a row, because you might not get something on the first 2, but the 3rd and 4th and 5th and 6th, you might get something on them, but something that you'd have probably missed. And I suppose what I'm going to refer to it as is commitment with people. People aren't committed to like what we were years ago. It's they see a TV show and go, oh gosh, in 45 minutes, look at everything that happened. Well, yeah, but that isn't in 45 minutes. That was probably filmed over 2 to 3 days. to get 45 minutes worth of average sort of quality, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
You know, and I think I would love us to go back to the good old ghost hunting days, and that's what I'm going to refer to it as. Everybody tells me off for calling it ghost hunting, but I would love to go back to the good old days and go back to what we used to do, just sitting in a room and just going, right, let's just see what happens.
Yeah, because Jenny asked if you think that the equipment nowadays would hinder our ways of investigation. I could also almost say yes.
Yeah, do you know what? I could agree with you both on that, because I don't really remember, but I remember iPhone brought out a Ghost Finder app on the iPhone. And I remember when it came out, everybody was going around haunted venues with the phone in their hand, with the Ghost Finder app on, going, "Oh my gosh, there's a ghost! Oh my gosh, there's a ghost!" And do you know, I'm sorry, logic has to kick in for me. And I think that this is an app that somebody's created in an office that's probably pre-programmed somewhere with something, you know, a little bit like a lot of the equipment that we use nowadays when it comes out with various word sentences. They're all pre-programmed. You know,
Yep.
you can't rely on things like that. But I mean, that's going away from what Jenny was asking there. I think certainly I have no problem in using equipment to almost qualify the things that we get. But I think at times we use the equipment to be the lead rather than using common sense and using our own abilities. And I think I would love it to be back where we used to go, when we were using our qualities of mediums, psychics, you know, sensitives, and then we use the equipment to almost go, well, actually, if somebody's there, right, so I'm feeling somebody, right, where are they stood? They're over in that corner of the room, right, let me go over there with a K2, right, okay, the K2 goes off, brilliant. That to me shows me that I'm picking something up and the person that's gone in the corner is detecting it as well. So I think we've just got to be mindful just not to get too hung up on equipment for me nowadays.
Yeah, it's like Phil says, we are the best spirit detectors.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that's true. That's definitely true. I agree with that fully.
Yeah, I mean, the amount of times, you know, that when we do an event, I always say to people, turn your phones off or put them into a flight mode. And you can guarantee that somebody won't. And you can tell straight away because you can see it. You remember the good old days when you used to see the signal, didn't you? You know, you could tell on a K2 because it'd like ring or whatever. And that really, for me, makes a mockery of going on an event. You know, and I think nowadays as well, a lot of events have almost become a little bit of sort of theatrical to people. You know, you get a group of people going along, not for the fact that they want to go on a paranormal investigation or a ghost hunt, but because it's a fun thing to do. Let's go and see if we're all scared.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Because that's the whole point. It's all thrill seeking.
It is. It is.
Yeah.
I'm just having a look at some of the questions.
Yeah.
We have Tracy. If our rampart blinks, it's like we've scored a penalty shootout in the World Cup.
Yeah. We are the same.
Yeah, I love that you said that. And, you know, don't get me wrong. I mean, I think equipment nowadays is phenomenal. I really do. And I remember using a REM pod. We did a private event at a friend's house. And my friend collected lots of war memorabilia, you know, First World War, Second World War. And I remember we put the REM pod in their attic room. It was a weird room. It was like an attic bedroom, but then there was like a big sort of walk-in wardrobe. And we put the REM pod in there. And I remember we were all sat there, no equipment, you know, we've got no phones or anything. And we could hear the REM pod almost doing Morse code. And it was bizarre, you know, I've never known it do that, you know, and you could literally hear it going, and I'm thinking, this is bizarre. This really is bizarre. You know, but that to me shows me something's there, because that isn't how a REM pod would work for me or should work for me, if that makes sense. And we forget this. We really do forget it.
We do. We have Karen. I have lost interest in some of these ghost hunting companies because they all use so much equipment. Agreed, definitely.
Yeah,
Noreen says if equipment is relied on too much, it takes attention away from what is occurring at times and things
yeah,
get missed. Agreed as well. Jenny, back to basic is best. I think the
Yeah.
point we get tired of equipment, put them away. I will use recorders and cameras. Yes, exactly, Jenny.
fabulous. Yeah,
Um, I
yeah.
do like to sit and call out and listen. Yeah, just use your ears.
Do you know, isn't it interesting that all the comments we're getting are about going back to basics, going back to
Yep,
when we just used to sit there and just go, if anything's there, what's going to happen? Let us know.
exactly.
You know, and I think and I see this a lot with mediums as well. You know, I see this a lot over the years. You know, when you look at physical mediumship, for instance, you know, people like Helen Duncan, you know, a tremendous physical mediumship there. You've got people like Colin Fry, who was a good friend of mine, you know, and these are the people to me that had a real quality. People like Doris Stokes, you know, and Doris Stokes was tried and tried and tried and tested so many times that it was almost at the point of people making it disbelieved, if that makes sense. And I find that very sad, because when I look back and think of some of the things that they used to do, you know, in terms of especially physical. Now, physical mediumship really is quite close to my heart, because I've had some tremendous things through physical mediumship. You know, we've sat for physical for quite a few years. And we've had hands form in the middle of our circle. We've had faces coming out the wall at the back of the room. We've had babies crying in the room, and none of us have got babies. Okay. And
Wow.
they're the things for me that really move you onto another level. You know, they really move mediumship and the metaphysical into a totally another world. And we forget about all that, you know, and again, I've run groups, sort of like training groups for people for many years, and you see it where people come to 2 or 3 groups and then that's it. They think that's it, they're off and they can do exactly what you do. And you know, they forget that it's not an overnight thing. It really isn't. It's something that I'm going to go back to what you said, Mary. It's that responsibility of what we all do, and that's what you've got to remember, whether you're doing a private sitting for somebody, whether you're doing a paranormal investigation for somebody, whether it be public or private, there's an element of responsibility that we all must have, because, you know, we've seen it all too often now. I mean, all of us have to have insurance because of the things that we do. If I do posters for events, I have to put that these are for entertainment purposes only because of my insurance. And, you know, and I find that quite sad in a way, you know, and I think a lot of that comes down to everything nowadays is about people making a claim for something you've said, you know, oh, you told me this and that never happened, or you missed this out, whatever. And, you know, I find that quite upsetting. And people all come to me for private readings and they want me to change the life for them. They want me to tell them that things are going to get better in a way. And I always say, well, what are you going to do about changing your life? You're asking a total stranger. That's like me coming to you two and saying, oh, well, can you change everything that's going to happen for me? Well, no, we can't. I can't change things that are in somebody's destiny line. What I can do is hopefully either pre-warn people, or I can help them deal with it in a different way. But I can't change somebody's physical path in life.
No, exactly.
You know, it's like I've said to people, and I always give this as a classic example. Somebody could come and have a private sitting with me, and I could say, well, if you walk out the door and turn left, everything's all right. But they might turn right, and I can't tell them not to.
Exactly.
We've all got free will. You know, we've all got free will. We've got free will. Upstairs have free will as well, you know. And again, I always say this to people: you can't demand of anybody upstairs in the spirit world. You know, if they want to talk to you, they'll talk to you. If they don't want to talk to you, they won't talk to you.
No, exactly.
Yeah.
I have to answer Phil, of course, now.
Just tell him off, Shane. Just tell him off. He's being very naughty. Very naughty.
Naughty Phil.
Yeah, but you know, I mean, I remember Yeah, naughty Phil, yeah. I remember Colin Fry telling me some of the stories about him when he first started sitting for physical, where they used to fasten him to the chair, it was literally cable tie him to the chair, and he'd come out of it, he'd wake up afterwards and he'd be lying on the floor with no clothes on. And the spirit world would say, we did it because we could. And that's what they do a lot of the time. They'll do it because they can. Even though we find it highly, highly funny, it's something that they can do. And I think what we very often do is we underestimate what the spirit world can do for us. And I mean, if anybody ever comes on a paranormal investigation with me, I really treat the spirit world with respect. I don't scream and shout. I don't swear at them. I don't demand that they've got to do this. I look at it that if that was me over the other side and somebody was screaming and shouting at me, I'd probably turn around and say, I'll leave you to it, because until you talk to me properly, I've no intention of working with you. So,
exactly.
Yeah. But it's interesting, isn't it? I love some of the comments, by the way.
Yes.
Noreen Hill, it is important to be responsible because a lot of people are looking for answers and are vulnerable in a vulnerable state. And we said this earlier, didn't we? We said this, that, as a medium, as a psychic medium, I don't know anybody's state of mind when they start having a reading with me. I don't know what. It really frustrates me in a way, because when we book people in, all we ever take is a first name and a phone number.
Yeah.
We don't take any other details. I don't want to know your address. I don't want to know your surname. I don't know who you want to contact in the spirit world, because I've always said this to people. The problem is you start doing that and suddenly my imagination comes in, not my spiritual side. My imagination comes in. And, you might want to talk to Bill in the spirit world. Well, suddenly my mind's going, you've got to find Bill. Bill's got to be there somewhere. And I don't like working like that. I like to go in, I'm going to use the word naked, but I don't want you to get a vision with me without any clothes on.
Too late.
But I like I like to go in and think what comes out, in terms of the spirit world. If I give somebody something, I want them to know that's what I'm picking up, not what you've put in here and what you've already preempted me with. It's what I'm picking up at that moment in time. And I think, we have to let the spirit world do the job, and I do get disheartened when people come to me and they come out with the classic questions. Am I going to get married? Am I going to meet my partner? Am I going to have children? And I think I always try and mirror things as a medium to people. And I always say, well, do you want to get married? Because if you don't want to get married, you won't get married. But if you want to get married, then there's a high possibility you will get married. But you don't need me to tell you that.
No, exactly.
You don't need me to tell you that you need to look for a new job. If you feel you need to look for a new job, then you need to look for a new job. Not come and ask me and go, oh, well, should I leave my job? Should I take a new job? Well, I can't tell you that. I can't change your life path.
No, they always think you can predict the future. I don't know why
Uh-huh.
that is.
Or you can solve problems.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of them being relationship problems as well. With people.
Yes.
That's one of the biggest things I see. Do you know, I one of the things that really touches me is when people come to see me and they'll say, afterwards, they'll say, what, I never said goodbye to my mum, or I never said goodbye to my dad or my partner. And, that really cuts me quite deep for people, because there are so many people that maybe have fallen out with loved ones in a strange way. And I think, isn't it a shame that you couldn't just put that to one side and you couldn't just say, do you know what? Yeah, okay. I was wrong. You were right. You were wrong. I was right. Whatever. And you just draw a line and you go, let's just move on from it, because people miss out so much in others' lives, I want to say, and I think that's quite sad in a way. I really do.
Yeah, it is, definitely.
So, yeah.
You're really good one, are you?
I'm laughing at what Phil's just put. Sorry.
Yes.
It wasn't me laughing and being naughty. Yeah, it's no, Phil. We're not doing that. We're not doing that. No.
It's probably illegal.
I
Probably.
always laugh. I always laugh. When I do a public demonstration for people, and one of the questions I always ask is, "Who's seen me before?" And then I'll say, "Who's new? Who's never seen me before?" And somebody will put their hand up, and I go, "That's fine." Well, in a minute, what happens is we turn the lights out, we all get undressed, and then we try and find each other. And honestly, the amount of people who look at me and think that I'm being serious, they really do think I'm being serious. And I go, no, we're not doing that. We're not doing that, And I think, I don't know what people expect when they come to a mediumship demonstration, first of all.
Yeah.
It's a little bit like, people expect the impossible, some people do. And unless you give them, I'll make this up, unless you give them their father's full name, his date of birth, how tall he was, what colour socks he used to wear, what his address was, I always say to people, you can't go in like that. It doesn't work like that. The spirit world, it's material things. They're not interested in material things. What they're interested in is giving you a message, and whether that message says move on with your life, or whether it says actually I never liked the partner that you was with anyway. And one of the biggest things what they tend to do with me, and I really tell the spirit world off for it, normally they'll pick on the person that's having an affair, and probably with somebody very close to them as well. And I have to think, please don't show me that. Okay, I have a wonderful laugh with the spirit world when I work with them, and my mum works with me in the spirit world. My mum passed over 22 years ago now, and she still comes through and works with me on the other side when she's there, and she's hilarious because what she does is she starts going through people's drawers, okay, and she'll start showing me through people's drawers, and normally it's somebody's underwear drawer what she shows me first of all, and I keep saying to her, you've got to stop doing this because I don't want to see what people have got hidden in drawers, okay, and I just find it really amusing, and people love it where sometimes I can get 2 or 3 links at the same time, and they'll go, oh, how do you do that? And I go, I don't know, and I don't want to do it because it exhausts me, because I'm trying to work with 3 different people and give 3 different messages, and somehow I've got the spirit world then wanting to work with everybody at the same time, and it's just phenomenal. It really is. But I take great, I'm going to call it pride in being able to help people, and I think that's the nice thing. I think when you can put your hand up and go, actually, I think I've done what I can do now for you, that's what means a lot to me. And as I say, I love the fact, somebody asked me the other day, they said, do you advertise? I said, no, I don't advertise, because a lot of my clients are all word of mouth nowadays, and it'll be somebody's had a reading with me, they'll recommend me, and then they'll recommend me to somebody else. And I think for me, that means a lot to me. I have a lot of clients that have been to me for years. Some have been to me for 15 years. And I don't mean that they come back every week. If somebody was going to do that to me, I'd stop them straight away. But I've got people who maybe come back to me 2 years, 3 years time. And I always remember one girl a few weeks ago, actually, she had a phone reading with me. And she said, I met you. Now, I can't remember when it was, something like 20 years ago. And I said, what, really? And she says, oh, yeah. She says, you walked in the room. We was having a group party booking. You walked in the room. She says, you come over to me. You looked straight at me. And you said, she's coming in 4 weeks, And she said, I had no idea what you was on about. And then afterwards, when I read her recently, she told me this story. And I said, I don't remember that. And she said, you won't. But I said, she says, I'll tell you what it was. And she says, what? She says she was having IVF treatment. And the period that I'd given her was when she got pregnant with a daughter. And she said, you would have never known that. You would have never known that. And she says, I still tell people to this day. And I remember another lady who's become a good friend now, came to see me again, a long time ago. And I said to her, I says, you will be pregnant. And she says, I won't. She says, I don't want children. And I says, you will. And it'll be £7 5 ounces. And she says, no. She says, I'll never get pregnant. And lo and behold, when she got pregnant, she was in hospital. And it made me laugh. She says, and they told me the way to the baby. And she said, I turned to my husband and she says, I had to tell him. She says, Barry was right, wasn't he? And no, I don't know anything about it. I don't know how it works. But yeah, but it's it's stories like that that really cheer me up and make me smile, because I think somebody upstairs must have been having a good laugh with me when they gave me that message to pass on to somebody and say, your baby's going to be £7 5 ounces. And I think, how would I know that? I'd have no idea at all.
We've got Phil. My wife is just breaking on her drama as we speak.
Problem is, Shane, he's still on naked ghost hunts. I'll tell you now.
Tracy says mine are locked.
Jackie
says brilliant.
Do you know, I have to say, it was it last year now? Gosh, I lose track of the years now. We did a Parameet event with Jackie. Jackie was there, and I had the pleasure of actually presenting Jackie with her Paranormal Award for a Paranormal piece, and it was a huge pleasure for me. It was one of them that really choked me up, because I think everybody that's in the field deserves to be recognised for what they do nowadays, And the problem is there are so many groups out there, paranormal groups, and everybody wants to be the best. Everybody wants to be the top of the ladder. And it's irrelevant. None of us are good. We're only as good as the people that we work with upstairs. And same with me. I have nights when I do an evening demonstration. And sometimes I come off stage and I think, you've done a really rubbish job there tonight. And somebody will send me a message. One person might send me a message and say, what you told me really helped me move on with things. And I think, obviously, I've done the job that I was meant to do. And I think what I'm very good at, and I mean this in a strange way, I'm very good at putting myself down. I'm very good at thinking, actually, I haven't done a good job for the spirit world here, when probably I've done a great job for them, but I don't appreciate that. And I just think I'm very good at putting myself down, and I should really just let the spirit world tell me off and just say, just get on with it, do the job. I'm just Jenny Sullivan is a lovely woman. I've just seen Jenny.
Yes.
Yeah. Jenny was there, and I remember it was the first time I met Jenny, and it's really weird because me and Jenny had exchanged a few messages online before we met at the Parameet, and I remember walking into the room, and Jenny looked at me, I looked at Jenny, and that was it. We both just had a good old laugh then, and it was like, oh my God, and it was just lovely. It was so nice. And one of the things I love about these paranormal meets is you meet some amazing, amazing people, people who we know the names, but we've probably not bumped into each other. And it's really difficult getting us all together, isn't it? And what's nice for me is you end up meeting people you've been talking to for years and years and years, and you think, gosh, I didn't know you looked like that.
Yes, or I didn't think you were that short.
Well, right. Do you know one of the things that people always say to me? You've got to remember, I'm 6'5", and people will always come into the room and they'll go, "Gosh, aren't you tall?"
6'5", you're a giant.
I am. Yeah.
Even for me,
I am. Yeah, 6'5". Honestly, yeah.
Oh my God.
I know. But we did an event, Phil mentioned it a few minutes ago, we did Matlock Pavilion a few weeks ago, myself and Jackie, and again, what was nice for us is that people were travelling from all over the place, all over the country to come and do events. And you forget that people really do appreciate these events. They want something that's different. And I like to think, in a strange way, the events that we do, yes, they're public events, but these are people who are genuinely interested in the paranormal, genuinely want something to happen. Excuse me, this isn't just a group of people who are coming because it's a night out. These are people who want to go away with something. And I remember on that night, and Jackie will remember this, there was a gentleman there with his family, and he got so emotional because of the messages that were coming through for him. Private messages, these are, not paranormal experience, but this was loved ones coming through. And one of the things I've always done on any sort of paranormal event is, if I think somebody's loved ones there, I'll tell them, okay? Because, you know, as we start working, we draw energy through. It just happens. You know, we can't dismiss who's going to communicate. And the way I like to think about it is that if you've got 30, 40 people in a room, suddenly this beacon of light that goes up going, oh, look at this, what are they doing? They're all ghost hunting. Well, let's go and have a look. And somebody's mum, dad, grandma, granddad, husband, wife comes through and tries to give them that impression, you know, wants them to know that they're okay and that everything's all right.
Yeah.
So, but
A
yeah, but
lot
it's
of
phenomenal.
heights coming by now.
It's like what? Yeah, I know. I can see them. I can see some of the comments.
Oh.
Yeah, I'm ignoring them, Phil. I'm ignoring them, Shane. Yeah, it's probably Phil, most of them, but they know me too well. That's the thing.
I see Jacqueline, I'm armpit high. I see Tracy, Barry is 6'5", I'm 5'6". Yeah, I have to admit I'm 5'9", but even he is big for me. I'm gonna be, hi Barry.
I have to wear my high heels. Then I'm noticeable.
You know,
Otherwise,
I remember being it was probably junior school, you know, just before I went up to like secondary school, and I was 6 foot tall then.
Wow.
So I've always had a big height on me. Get it from my mum's side. You know, this will make you laugh now. So if people are trying to give me a reading, if a medium wants to give me a reading, it's quite funny because my family are very distinctive. My dad's side, no disrespect, are all short and dumpy. My mum's side are all tall and lanky like me, all tall characters. So I know straight away if somebody's trying to give me a reading, exactly, if they describe the person, I'll go, right, I know what side that is. And especially if they try and mix it up and go, well, no, it was short on your mum's side. And I go, no, mum's side weren't short. My mum was nearly 6 foot tall.
Oh
Yeah.
my God.
Yeah.
As you started talking, I got this picture in my head. My grandma was 6'3", and my grandpa was 5 foot. So, yeah.
Yeah, it is. Honestly, you know, I just find it amazing. I really do, and I love what I do. You know, I love the fact that people get comfort from what I do. People will very often message me afterwards, as I say, and I always remember a few stories. You know, I remember reading a lady once at a little pub not too far away. I did a small event, and this lady suddenly burst into tears when I went up to her at the end, and I said, are you okay? And she says, I've waited 25 years for my dad to come through and you brought him through to me tonight. And, you know, my heart just burst. My heart just welled up for her. And I could feel this emotion. And it goes back again to what we were saying a few minutes ago, where she'd probably got things that she needed to say to him that she hadn't been able to say. And that really upset me. You know, it just touched me. It touched me quite deep. And I suppose in a way, you know, I'm a big softie. You know, I want people to go away knowing that there's more to life than death. And one of the things I always say to people at events is, just because you didn't get a message, it doesn't mean to say your loved one's not there. All it means is that somebody probably needed the connection more than you did. And I like people to think that, you know, whatever message somebody's receiving, they can almost take a little bit of an understand why it's been given in a strange way. And I've never. It's bizarre, really, because when I read for people, whether it be a private sitting, whether it be a public demonstration, I never make eye contact with people. I always look out into the corner of the room, or I'm looking somewhere different. And people will say, "Why do you do it?" And I'll go, because I don't want to see your emotion. Your emotion is yours. If you want to cry, you cry, because what that means to me is that whatever I've done has helped you release something somewhere, whether that be a positive or an upsetting situation. It's helped you release something, and I think that's what we should all be mindful of. You know, that, you know, we've heard the stories time and time again. You know, face reading mediums, you play on people's emotions.
Yeah.
You play on people's words. I mean, that's, to be honest, that's the other thing for me. When I'm working with people, if I'm giving somebody a reading, I very rarely let them get a word in edgeways. I have to be honest. You know, I'm a talker, and I'll just talk at them and give the message, give the message, give the message.
Yeah.
You know, and I don't want to feed off people's emotions. You know, that's not what I do. What I want to do is let them get what they want from me. And again, I always say to people, you know, if you've got any questions, you ask me while I'm working. You know, just throw it in, because if I've got somebody's dad and they're wanting to know, I don't know, what did he think of me, or what did he think of my partner, then ask me, because I'll tell you, because I'm in the moment. You know, I've got your dad with me and he'll talk back to me, you know. And I think people forget at times that having a reading is a two-way thing. It's a two-way flow of information. You know, somewhere in between somebody's loved one and the person down here, I'm just a telephone receiver, and somebody somewhere needs to connect those two together, and that's what I do. But if that connection isn't followed, so if I'm giving a message to somebody and there's no sort of acknowledgement, upstairs they'll just pull back. They'll just pull away from me, because they'll go, they're just not listening. And that's sad for me, you know, because, you know, again, that goes back to the old days of mediumship where, oh, you know, if you're having a reading, don't tell them anything, don't talk to them, don't acknowledge them, don't nod your head, don't shake your head. And I always say, I'm not bothered at the end of the day. I will tell you exactly what I get. But, you know, as I said a few seconds ago, I don't look at people when I'm reading because I don't want to.
No.
You know,
Exactly.
Do we have a few messages? We are about an hour now, and we promise to keep it in an hour.
I need to have my dinner. Yeah, I mean, do you know, I mean, has anybody got any questions they want to throw in? I'm just having a quick look.
Well, every time I wanted to ask a question, you answered it before I could ask it, so.
Yeah, you explained it in a way that makes sense.
I'll take that as a telling off now. But you know, I think for me, it's getting the word out to everybody that we're all here for the same purpose. You know, whether you be a paranormal investigator, a medium, a psychic, even skeptics. Let's be honest. You know, I mean, people always laugh when I say this next bit. I always describe myself as a skeptical medium. That doesn't mean I don't believe. What that means is I do believe, but I want more evidence. I want more information. And that's what I want all the time, you know, and that's what I want people to want as well. You know, I want them to want more, whether that be, as I say, a paranormal event or a mediumship reading of some kind. But I think it's so important that we remember, you know, we're not here from an egotistical perspective. We're here because we're trying to prove something exists, whatever that is. Yeah, I have no problem. You know, people believe in UFOs, aliens, extraterrestrial characters, spirit world, whatever. I have no problem. But, you know, we're all here to try and prove that life exists somewhere. And, you know, the one thing I always laugh about, I always say this to people, is God help you all when I'm over the other side, because I will come and sit on the end of everybody's bed and just sing away to you all night to keep you awake.
Yeah.
I always get that image. Sorry, I always get that image of if you've seen the film Ghost, where Patrick Swayze sits on the end of the bed singing Henry VIII I Am, and that's what I want to do. Anyway, oh, Jenny Sullivan, when are you coming to Ireland? Do you know what? I love Ireland. I really do. And one of the things I would love to do is do a tour of Ireland, because I love the quaintness of Ireland as well. But I know Jenny keeps asking us to go and do an event over there, and we must do some sort of paranormal event. But, you know, I have a bit of a confession now to say. I've got to say that, you know, in a few more years, I want to try and slow things down again for me, because, you know, it's always been a huge, huge passion, and it always will be a huge passion. I'll never, ever walk away from my my spirituality, if I refer to it as that. But, you know, what I love is seeing people grow. I see people coming into the industry. I want people to grow. I want them to be better than me. That's the way that I'm going to refer to it. And if I can help somebody up that ladder, I will go out my way to make sure somebody gets to where they need to be, you know. And we all forget that at times, you know. We forget why we're here. We're here to help each other.
Yeah, exactly.
One last question, and then we're
Yeah.
gonna wrap it up. No, is it this one? No, it's this one. It was great listening to you. Thank you. Do you ever get frustrated when people cannot take their reading?
Right, this is a lovely question, and thanks, Karen, for asking that. Right, that's a real interesting point, because I see this all too often with people, even when I've gone to mediumship shows. But, you know, I could guarantee I wouldn't get frustrated. If that was me, I wouldn't get frustrated, because I have done so many readings over my lifespan that I know, and again, take this as I mean it, I know that I'm right. And people will go away going, I don't understand a word of it. And they'll message us the next day. They'll speak to mum, dad, grandma, granddad, and they'll go, how did you know that? Okay. I'm going to tell you a very quick story now. There was a gentleman who'd come to me for a reading, and I always find gentlemen are the hardest people to read at times because they're so closed off. Okay. Ladies are easier because they're more open. Men are almost like, you've got to prove it to me. If you're not going to prove it, I'm not going to accept it. And I remember reading this gentleman. And I said to him, who's Stephen? I've got Stephen here, and he's talking to me about you. No, I don't know Stephen, don't know Stephen at all. So we did the reading. Obviously, he left. 2 minutes later, he rang the doorbell. And I said, oh, have you forgot something? Have you forgot your wallet? He said, Stephen's my granddad. And it was just like, you know when your mouth hits the floor, and I thought,
Yeah.
okay, all right. And you know, that to me, it's things like that. But as I say, you know, sometimes when you have a reading, it might not make sense straight away until you spoke to somebody at home, until you spoke to the older generation somewhere, and suddenly they'll go, oh yeah, I understand that. Yeah, I know about that. You know, it's bizarre. It really is bizarre. But no, I don't get frustrated. I just go with it. And I think the spirit world have never let me down. They've always been there. And I always say, you need to go and ask about this first of all.
Yeah. I still have one more question because Jenny has a very good one. One last question. Do you record your readings for people to take away with them?
That's a really interesting question. Right. We used to record them. And then I got accused by a lady of keeping the recordings and using them afterwards. And my lawyer at the time said, right, that's it. You don't record them anymore. And we don't record anymore. If somebody wishes to record it, they can do it on their own device. But we stopped doing it for legal reasons because somebody accused me once of basically keeping all the recordings, which would mean absolutely nothing to me whatsoever. And I'm not really interested in somebody's private reading afterwards, no disrespect. So no, we don't. But we allow people to record. So if somebody wanted to record on their computer or on their phone or whatever, don't have a problem with that at all.
Oh, I hate people in that regard.
Yeah.
It's really tough at times, and we went through a spate, and we always get this when we do an event. People will always say, "Oh, I'm not giving you any details. I'm not giving you any details," and we go, "Well, why not?" "Oh, well, you're going to trace me." Well, hang on a minute. I've got an audience of 300 people. Do you think I remember 300 people's names and addresses in here? Okay. I'm not being funny. I can't remember what I did this morning. Never mind 300 people's names and addresses. And if people really think I have the time to sit at home going through Facebook looking for everybody's name or address or whatever, you're in the wrong industry for me because I don't have the time to do that.
Nope.
But yeah. Any more questions? Do you think? Oh, Jean B. What's Jeanette Bean on about? I'm a very lucky. Oh, right. Okay. Interesting. Okay. So you've seen apparitions at home. Brilliant. Okay. I always say to people, encourage them. If you're seeing it, ask them again and again and again. Maybe there's a message there somewhere. If you keep seeing the same person, maybe they're just letting you know that they're there. Maybe it's an element of support for you, especially if you're going through a tough time, okay?
Definitely.
One of the things I always talk to people about is, when you're at your lowest point, whatever you want to call it, or you just want to talk to your loved ones, just sit and just call them in. Just say, right, if you're there, Mum, I need you at the moment. and let them come in. But when you get in that feeling, whatever you get, we'll all feel it in different ways. Some of us will sense it in here. Some of us will feel like pins and needles, coldness, hot, chills, whatever, You've got to trust it. You've got to go with it. Don't try and reason it, is the way that I'll say it.
No, exactly. Jeanette says it's different people's.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's interesting, because I don't know Jeanette at all, but certainly I would say you are a sensitive in a strange way. You're picking things up, you're sensing it, and you're feeling it. What I would encourage you to do, if you were talking to me about this, I'd encourage you to talk to them and go, right, who are you? What do you want? What are you here for? What's your name? And they will answer you. They really will. It's a communication flow. If you're going to communicate with them, they'll communicate back. If you're going to be there all quiet and not acknowledge them, they're going to go, too busy, I'll move on, I'll go somewhere else.
Yeah.
And that's what you have to forget with the spirit world. They find it very easy just to move on. And, I was talking about this the other day. Somebody asked me a question. In fact, I think it was Scott, actually. I think Scott's online. And we were talking about time in the spirit world, and do they have a concept of time? Now, I don't think they do, because nothing's important in terms of time, and we see this time and time again when we work with them, where, maybe they'll give you an indication of something coming up. But I remember at times I've said to people, oh, yeah, they're telling me February, February, I don't know, February's like a house move. And they go, no. Well, it might be next February that they're telling me, but they don't understand that, because there isn't that concept of time there. And, we must remember that. And we were talking about paranormal events as well, and saying that why is it easier to communicate with some spirits than others? Well, some spirits might not even be able to communicate in their own language. They might not understand language, and it's like we were talking about using equipment. That was one of the things, and what we were saying was, it's all right as saying, "Oh, go towards the lights," but they might not know what lights are. They might not know what a K2 is. They might not know what a glass is on a table, and we have to remember this. We only have to go back, probably a century, and people couldn't write their own names.
No.
And we forget things like this. We forget that we say spirit have got intelligence, but what we also forget is there's a lot of spirit out there that probably didn't have an element of intelligence. That doesn't mean to say that they couldn't remember the name, but it might be the fact that they don't know how to write the name. That's the thing, and we must remember that when we're doing paranormal events. Keep it simple, keep it straightforward. Somebody said this earlier on in one of the comments, go back to basics, keep it simple for me. And definitely. I think we must always remember that. I really do.
Yeah.
Karen says you don't always remember every reading you give either. Saw an apparition at Newsham. I thought it was a guest until it walked through the door.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think that'll be Newsham Park Hospital in Liverpool, which is a tremendous event. If anybody ever gets the opportunity, you must do it.
I have to do a lot of events.
Yeah.
Jenny has one last question again.
That's all right. You're all right. Don't worry.
Sorry, Mary and Shay. In a home that was active and went away, and stress starts again, that your home becomes active again. Is it someone that you know or your guides being there?
Right. Now, this is an interesting one for me, because I always say this to people, right? So say, I'm going to give an example here. Say we're going into somebody's private home because they've got activity. Well, as investigators, as psychics, as mediums, we can go, right, okay, you need to move on. They've recognized you here. They don't want you here. Move on. Now, the way that I always say this to people is, remember that as soon as we've left, if that person goes, oh, I quite liked having them here, I quite liked them being in my house, well, you put the intention out straight away and they'll come back. They'll come back and join you, whether that be somebody who you know or you don't know. So you've got to be mindful of the intention. If you want a spirit to leave, you don't acknowledge it anymore. You go, right, they've gone. Simple as, okay. But as soon as you put that thought pattern out and go, actually, I miss them, I want them back, they'll reappear. And this is what we see all too often in terms of sort of paranormal activity in people's private homes. It's the fact that maybe we've gone in and I don't like saying get rid of it, because I believe spirit have free will, but we've told the spirit to move on. But then as soon as we've left, the individual's gone, actually, I feel quite lonely now. They've gone, I want them to come back and talk to us again. So just be mindful about that. It's no different to your own loved ones, seriously.
No, it is. Definitely. Right. We are through with the questions now. So we're going to...
Yes.
Thank you very much for joining us.
Yes.
My
Have
pleasure.
Nice
I'm sorry for being a talker, by the way.
Oh, no, it's fine.
No problem at all. I loved it.
That's actually what our show is all about. Just talk.
Yeah.
Do you know, it's lovely in a way that, you know, I don't get the sort of classic questions, if that makes sense. You know, whenever you do a show, you always get the classic questions that come out. And I remember doing a show with somebody and I said, just ask me my 10 favourite things. Ask me my 10 favourite things in life or whatever. And, you know, people forget that, yes, I do what I do, but I am a normal person as well. You know, I still have a home, I still have a life, I still have family, I still have animals, etc. I still have partners. And I think people forget that, you know, they almost forget that you have a life. And the amount of messages that I get on Facebook where people will just send me a message and say, oh, is my dad with me? Well, I don't know, because I'm at home at the moment having my dinner, you know. You know, and probably is there that, you know, I'm not connecting with him at the moment because I'm having my dinner.
Exactly.
Exactly. You know what? I've loved it.
I should really think about that.
Yeah, I've loved the fact that we've just let it go where it went tonight, and I didn't know where it was going to go, but clearly it's gone somewhere.
It's gone somewhere, and we're alive longer than you were anticipated to be here. So
yes.
The problem is, you know, once you get me on a roll, I don't shut up.
Yeah.
Well, time flies.
You warned me.
You know, honestly, if, you know, any time I can help anybody, you know, yourselves, any of the guests, etc., you know, they've only got to message me, and I'll always go out my way to be there for people if I can. I really will.
Well, thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Seriously.
Thank you.
We had a lot of fun. We want to thank you for being on, and we want to thank everybody for watching our show again, which were a lot of watchers if I was looking at it.
Yes.
So thank you, Barry. Come again.
Of course I will. Yeah, anytime. Yeah, just let me know and we'll jump on and we'll have a giggle next time or something.
Yeah, absolutely.
We will definitely do that. So thank you everybody for watching, and we will see you guys in the next show, and we will hear you on Spotify in the next one. So yeah, until next week.
Till next week.
Bye everybody.
Bye.
Thanks for watching. We hope you liked the video. If you did, don't forget to like and subscribe.